The holographic display in Marcus Fletcher's workshop flickered as he made final adjustments to his latest quantum stabilizer design. At 32, he'd earned a reputation as Silicon Valley's most innovative engineer, though he never understood why people made such a fuss about his work. To him, engineering solutions came as naturally as breathing. The air suddenly crystallized around him, molecules freezing in place like suspended diamonds. Before he could process what was happening, reality itself seemed to fold, and he found himself standing in a vast chamber that defied earthly architecture. Walls of living light pulsed with colors he'd never seen before, and floating before him were beings that seemed to be made of pure energy. "Marcus Fletcher," resonated a voice that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to his mind. "You stand before the Celestial Council, charged with the crime of dangerous perfection." Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, more confused than afraid. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. I'm just an engineer." An engineer who has never failed to solve a problem. A human whose genetic code shows signs of advancement beyond your species' current evolutionary stage, stated another voice, this one feeling like frost in his thoughts. "Your existence threatens the balance of the galaxy." "Look," Marcus said, maintaining his composure despite the absurdity of the situation. "I'm good at what I do because I work hard. That's all there is to it." The chamber darkened, and suddenly Marcus was surrounded by holographic displays of his life. Every project he'd completed, every problem he'd solved, every physical feat he'd accomplished without really trying. He watched himself design revolutionary technologies, master complex skills in days instead of years, and heal from injuries at an inexplicable rate. "Your modesty, while admirable, does not change the facts," declared a third council member, its form shifting like mercury. "Your genetic structure is achieving what we have termed dangerous perfection, a state of advancement that could destabilize the careful balance we maintain across all sentient species." Marcus crossed his arms, his analytical mind already picking apart their logic. "And what exactly makes this perfection dangerous?" The chamber filled with images of civilizations rising and falling, species advancing too quickly and destroying themselves, genetic lines that burned too bright and too fast. "Balance requires imperfection," explained the first voice. "Progress must come at a measured pace. Your existence threatens to accelerate human evolution beyond sustainable parameters." "So what's the solution?" Marcus asked, already suspecting he wouldn't like the answer. "Are you going to eliminate me?" The council member's energy forms pulsed with what might have been amusement. "No, destruction would be wasteful. Instead, you will serve as a catalyst." The chamber shifted again, showing Marcus a massive starship. "You will be given command of this vessel, the Genesis Seed. Your mission is to travel to specific worlds we designate, introducing controlled aspects of your genetic advancement to help guide their evolution. You will be both a gift and a warning to these civilizations." "And if I refuse?" The chamber grew cold. "Then we will have no choice but to quarantine Earth until humanity's evolution returns to acceptable parameters. Your entire species will be cut off from the galaxy, prevented from advancing beyond their solar system." Marcus felt the weight of billions of lives settling onto his shoulders. His perfect mind rapidly calculated possibilities, outcomes, and potential consequences. How long would this mission take? "Time flows differently across the galaxies," the council responded. "What might be years for you could be generations for others, but your genetic perfection includes enhanced longevity. You will live long enough to complete your task." The engineer in Marcus couldn't help but be intrigued by the challenge, even as the human in him reeled at the implications. "Do I at least get time to prepare? To say goodbye?" "The mission begins now," declared the council in unison. "Your consciousness will be transferred to the Genesis Seed, along with all necessary knowledge for your task. Your human affairs have already been arranged to show that Marcus Fletcher has taken a position with a private space exploration company." Before Marcus could protest, the chamber began to dissolve around him. The last thing he heard was the council's final pronouncement. "Remember, you are no longer just Marcus Fletcher. You are now the bearer of evolution, tasked with ensuring that perfection spreads at a pace the universe can withstand. Reality shifted once more, and Marcus found himself standing on the bridge of an impossibly advanced starship. Displays he somehow knew how to read showed him his first destination, a world orbiting a distant star, where a species of crystalline beings were approaching their own evolutionary crossroads. As the Genesis seed's engines hummed to life, Marcus looked out at the vast expanse of space before him. Well, he muttered to himself, at least they didn't call it a perfect plan. The crystalline spires of Zephyria Prime pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces refracting the light of three suns. Marcus stood at the Genesis seed's viewport, studying the alien world that would be his first test as the bearer of evolution. The ship's AI had spent their 3-month journey teaching him about the Zephyrians, a species of silicon-based life forms whose society was as rigid as their crystalline bodies. Approaching designated landing coordinates, announced the ship's AI, its voice carrying hints of the Celestial Council's resonance. The Zephyrian High Assembly awaits your arrival. Marcus adjusted the environmental suit the ship had fabricated for him. Have they been told why I'm here? They know only that you come as an agent of evolution. The specifics of your condition remain classified. The landing was smoother than it should have been possible, another reminder of the advanced technology he now commanded. As Marcus descended the ship's ramp, he was met by a delegation of Zephyrians. They moved with a grace that belied their crystalline nature, their bodies catching and splitting light into rainbow cascades. "Welcome, bearer of evolution," spoke the tallest of them, its voice creating harmonics that made the very air vibrate. "I am First Resonator Lyrics. We have awaited your arrival with great anticipation." Marcus noticed how the other Zephyrians seemed to vibrate at slightly different frequencies, creating a constant, subtle discord. According to his briefing, this was a sign of their species' growing evolutionary crisis. Their harmonics were becoming increasingly unstable. "The honor is mine, First Resonator," Marcus replied, the suit automatically translating his words into the proper harmonic frequencies. "I understand your people stand at a crucial junction." Lyrics's crystalline form shifted, creating a sound like wind through glass. "Yes, our youngest generation shows signs of fundamental frequency shifts. Many fear this heralds the shattering of our society." The Zephyrian led Marcus through corridors of living crystal, where other members of their species were embedded in the walls, sharing thoughts and energy through resonant frequencies. But Marcus noticed dark fractures in some of the crystals, places where the harmonics had become too discordant. "Your people are changing," Marcus observed, his enhanced mind already analyzing patterns in the crystalline structures around him. But change doesn't have to mean destruction. They arrived at a vast chamber where hundreds of Zephyrians were assembled, their combined harmonics creating a symphony of light and sound that would have overwhelmed normal human senses. In the center stood a large crystalline formation that Marcus recognized as their equivalent of a genetic laboratory. "This is where we attempt to stabilize our young," explained Lyrics, "but our efforts have been insufficient." Marcus approached the crystal formation, placing his hand against its surface. Through his suit's sensors, he could feel the complex vibrations within, the genetic song of a species on the brink of transformation. His own enhanced genetics responded, creating subtle frequencies that the Zephyrians couldn't detect, but that made the crystals resonate in new ways. "Your people aren't becoming discordant," Marcus said, understanding flowing through him like electricity. "They're developing the ability to hold multiple harmonics simultaneously. You're evolving from a single-frequency species to a multi-harmonic one." The chamber erupted in a cascade of tones as the assembled Zephyrians reacted to his words. Lyrics stepped forward, their form vibrating with intensity. "But such complexity! It goes against all our traditional harmonics. The strain is causing crystals to shatter." Marcus smiled, remembering the Council's words about controlled evolution. "Because you're fighting it, the key isn't to prevent the new harmonics, but to learn how to integrate them gradually." He turned to the assembly. "Let me show you." Over the next several weeks, Marcus worked with the Zephyrians, using his own enhanced understanding to help them develop techniques for managing multiple harmonics. He discovered that his presence alone seemed to catalyze controlled changes in their crystalline structures, allowing for more complex resonances without the risk of shattering. But as the Zephyrians began to master their new abilities, Marcus noticed something unexpected. His own genetic structure was responding to their harmonics, incorporating new patterns that he hadn't possessed before. He was evolving too. Late one night, as he stood alone in his chamber aboard the Genesis Seed, Marcus addressed the ship's AI. "The Council didn't tell me everything, did they? This isn't just about controlling the evolution of other species." The AI was silent for a long moment before responding. "Your observation is correct. The exchange of genetic information is bidirectional. Each species you help will also contribute to your own evolution." Marcus looked out at the crystalline city, where new harmonics now played in perfect balance with the old. "They're using me as more than a catalyst. I'm a repository, gathering genetic innovations from across the galaxy." "Yes," confirmed the AI. "The question is, for what purpose?" Before Marcus could respond, an alert flashed across his screens. Another world needed the bearer of evolution's guidance. But as he prepared the Genesis Seed for departure, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was now part of something far more complex than mere evolutionary control. The Zephyrians gathered to bid him farewell, their new multi-harmonic songs creating patterns of light and sound that would have been impossible weeks ago. As the Genesis Seed lifted off, Marcus wondered what other changes awaited him among the stars, and what he might ultimately become when his journey was complete. The Genesis Seed dropped out of hyperspace near the edges of the Andromeda galaxy, its sensors immediately detecting something wrong. The mining colony of Helios 9, Marcus's next designated destination, was dark. No power signatures, no communication beacons, nothing but the dim reflection of starlight off abandoned mining equipment. "Scanning for life signs," the ship's AI announced. "Detecting multiple species present, but they appear to be deliberately masking their energy signatures." Marcus frowned. "That's not typical behavior for a mining colony. Are they hiding from something?" "Warning," the AI interrupted. "Incoming vessel, unknown configuration." Before Marcus could react, a sleek black ship materialized from behind a nearby asteroid. Its design was unlike anything he'd seen in the Council's database. The ship's weapons remained powered down, but its presence was unmistakably intentional. A communication request flashed across his console. After a moment's hesitation, Marcus accepted it. The holographic display materialized to show a woman with striking violet eyes and silver-streaked black hair. Her uniform bore no insignia of any known spacefaring civilization. "Marcus Fletcher," she said, her voice carrying an authority that reminded him of the Council. "I am Commander Nova Vale. Welcome to the Resistance." Marcus maintained his composure, though his enhanced mind was already calculating possible escape routes. "Resistance against what?" "Against the lie you've been living." Nova's eyes narrowed. "Did you really think you were the only one, the only perfect being the Council has pressed into service?" The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Of course, it made too much sense. The Council wouldn't risk their entire evolutionary control program on a single agent. "We have much to discuss," Nova continued. "Dock with my ship. I'll show you what the Council doesn't want you to see." The ship's AI spoke privately through Marcus's neural link. "This is inadvisable. It contradicts Council protocols." But Marcus had spent months questioning the Council's true motives. "Sometimes," he replied, "evolution requires breaking old patterns." He engaged the docking sequence. Nova's ship, the Shadowbreak, was a marvel of engineering that seemed to incorporate technologies from dozens of different species. As Marcus followed her through its corridors, he saw other beings, some humanoid, some utterly alien, all working with a sense of shared purpose. They entered what appeared to be a command center, its walls covered with displays showing various sectors of space. Nova gestured to a central hologram showing hundreds of connecting points of light. Each light represents someone like you, she explained. Beings the Council deemed perfect, forced to serve as evolutionary catalysts. We've been tracking the pattern for centuries. Marcus studied the display, his enhanced perception noting complex relationships between the points of light. These aren't random assignments. They're creating some kind of network. Exactly. Nova activated another display showing genetic data streams. The Council isn't just controlling evolution, they're harvesting it. Each perfect being they send out collects genetic innovations from the species they encounter. But for what purpose? I noticed changes in my own genetic structure after working with the Zephyrians, Marcus admitted. The Council's AI confirmed it was intentional. Nova's expression darkened. It goes deeper than that. Look at this. She brought up a new display showing temporal data. The Council isn't just operating across space, they're manipulating time itself. Some of us have been serving as catalysts for what would be thousands of years in normal time. How is that possible? The same way they brought you to their court, Nova explained. The Council exists outside normal spacetime. They're playing a game across epochs, using us as pieces on their board. Marcus processed this information, his perfect mind assembling connections. You said you're tracking a pattern. What's the end game? Nova hesitated, then pressed a sequence on the console. A new hologram appeared, showing a spiral of genetic information so complex it made Marcus's enhanced senses strain to comprehend it. We believe they're building towards something, a convergence of all these collected genetic innovations. The question is, what are they trying to create? Before Marcus could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. A crew member burst into the command center. Commander, Council vessels detected in multiple sectors. They're targeting other bearers. Nova's hands flew across the controls. They're trying to protect their secret. We need to move quickly. She turned to Marcus. You have a choice to make. Continue being their puppet or help us expose the truth. Marcus looked at the displays, at the evidence of a conspiracy spanning galaxies and eons. He thought of the Zephyrians, of how their evolution had changed him, of all the species still waiting for their own catalysts of change. The Council claims to maintain balance, he said slowly, but they're manipulating everything toward their own ends. That's not balance, that's control. Nova nodded. Welcome to the Resistance, bearer of evolution. The Shadowbreak's engines hummed to life as Nova began issuing orders to her crew. Marcus felt the Genesis seed link to his mind, accepting new commands that went against its original programming. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, he realized that his role as a catalyst for evolution had taken on an entirely new meaning. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the Celestial Council became aware of his choice. Their perfect plan had just developed an imperfection, and nothing would ever be the same. The ancient archives of Nexus Station hung suspended in the void between dimensions, a repository of knowledge collected across millennia. Marcus and Nova stood before a crystalline matrix that contained the combined genetic histories of 1,000 civilizations. After 3 months of evading Council forces, they had finally reached this hidden sanctuary of the Resistance. The station exists in a pocket of folded space-time, Nova explained as she interfaced with the archive's controls. The Council can't reach us here. They built their own prison when they chose to exist outside normal time. Marcus watched as streams of genetic data flowed through the matrix, his enhanced perception detecting patterns that would have been invisible to normal humans. These aren't just random evolutionary records. They're connected somehow. Look at this. Nova brought up a particular sequence that pulsed with familiar energy. Recognize it. Marcus leaned closer, his eyes widening. That's my genetic code. But it's not just mine. I'm seeing elements of Zephyrian harmonics, traces of other species I've encountered. Now watch this. Nova overlaid thousands of other genetic sequences, data collected from other bearers of evolution across space and time. The patterns aligned and interconnected, forming a vast, intricate web of shared traits and complementary mutations. It's like a puzzle, Marcus breathed, his perfect mind racing to comprehend the scale of what he was seeing. Each bearer, each species we interact with, we're all contributing pieces to some larger design. A new voice joined their conversation. A design that's been in motion for far longer than any of us realized. From the shadows emerged a being that seemed to shift between forms, sometimes humanoid, sometimes crystalline, sometimes pure energy. I am Oracle, one of the first bearers. How long have you been collecting this data? Marcus asked, unable to take his eyes off the mesmerizing pattern of genetic information. Since before your species learned to make fire, Oracle replied. The Council's plan spans millions of years. They've been guiding evolution across the galaxy, using beings like us to cultivate specific traits, to gather genetic innovations that serve their purpose. Nova pulled up another display, this one showing temporal markers across multiple galaxies. We've detected a pattern in their assignments. They're not just collecting genetic material, they're preparing for something. A convergence. Marcus studied the temporal data, his enhanced perception nodding subtle correlations. These time streams, they're all flowing toward a single point in space-time. Something's coming. The question is what? Oracle said, their form rippling with concern. What could be so significant that it requires millions of years of prepared evolution? Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Nova's hands flew across the controls. Multiple temporal breaches detected? That's impossible, they couldn't have found us here. The crystalline matrix flickered as space itself seemed to warp around them. Through the station's viewports, Marcus saw reality fracturing, revealing glimpses of other times, other places. And through these cracks in space-time, massive shapes were emerging. Those aren't Council ships, Nova breathed, her violet eyes wide with shock. They're something else. The beings that emerged defied comprehension, vast, crystalline entities that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their very presence caused ripples in reality, distorting space and time around them. Oracle's form became more solid, more focused. The architects, they whispered, the ones who came before the Council, they're returning. The station's sensors overloaded as they tried to analyze the impossible beings. Marcus felt his enhanced genetics responding to their presence, resonating with something ancient and familiar. The Council! They weren't preparing us to fight these beings. They were preparing us to understand them. Nova's hands gripped the console. The genetic pattern, it's not a weapon or a tool. It's a language. They've been teaching us how to communicate with the architects, one evolutionary step at a time. The crystalline matrix suddenly pulsed with new energy as genetic information from across time and space began flowing together, forming new patterns, new possibilities. Marcus felt his own genetic structure shifting, evolving in response to the presence of the architects. We're not just bearers of evolution, he realized, watching as his DNA reconfigured itself in ways that should have been impossible. We're translators, bridges between normal space-time and whatever realm these beings inhabit. Oracle nodded, their form becoming increasingly complex. The Council's true purpose wasn't control, it was preparation. The architects are returning to our universe, and without properly evolved beings to communicate with them, their mere presence would tear reality apart. Through the fractures in space-time, more architects were emerging. The station shuddered as reality itself struggled to adapt to their presence. Marcus looked at Nova, seeing in her violet eyes the same understanding that was dawning in his perfect mind. Their evolution hadn't been about perfection, it had been about transcendence. And now, as the barriers between dimensions crumbled, they would need every genetic innovation, every adaptation, every perfect trait they had gathered to face what was coming. The final convergence was beginning, and the true purpose of the bearers of evolution was about to be revealed. Reality trembled as the architects continued to emerge through the fractures in space-time. Nexus Station groaned under the strain of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Marcus, Nova, and Oracle stood at the center of the crystalline matrix, their evolved genetics resonating with the higher dimensional energies flooding the station. The Council vessels are approaching, Nova announced, her hands dancing across controls that now operated in 4 dimensions. They're not attacking, they're forming a containment grid around the temporal breaches. Marcus watched as council ships, their true forms finally revealed as constructs of pure energy, moved into position around the station. They're trying to stabilize local space-time, he realized. They're protecting the rest of the universe from what's happening here. The holographic image of the lead council member materialized before them, its energy form more complex than Marcus had ever seen. "We had hoped for more time to prepare," it said, its voice resonating across multiple frequencies of reality. "The architect's return was predicted, but not this soon." "You could have told us the truth," Nova challenged, her violet eyes flashing. "Instead, you manipulated countless beings across millions of years." "Would you have understood?" the council member asked. "Could any species have comprehended the true scope of what was needed?" Its form shifted, revealing layers of complexity that matched the patterns in the genetic matrix. "Evolution requires guidance, but understanding must be earned." The station shuddered again as another architect emerged. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding, his perfect mind adapting to perceive realities that shouldn't have been possible to comprehend. The genetic innovations he had gathered from the Zephyrians and other species were transforming, combining in new ways. Oracle's form began to pulse with increasing intensity. "The convergence is happening now. Every bearer, every species we've touched, the combined genetic pattern is activating." Marcus watched in awe as strands of DNA across the galaxy began to shift and transform. The Council's true plan was unfolding, not the suppression of evolution, but its orchestration on a cosmic scale. Every species they had guided was simultaneously evolving, developing the ability to perceive and interact with higher dimensions. "The architects aren't invaders," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. "They're the next step. The universe itself is evolving, and we needed to be ready." Nova gasped as her own genetic structure began to transform. "The resistance, we were part of the plan too, weren't we? You needed some of us to question, to push boundaries, to find our own path to understanding." The council members' form rippled in what might have been appreciation. "Perfect obedience creates stagnation. True evolution requires both guidance and rebellion. You were chosen for your perfection, Marcus Fletcher, but it was your choices that proved your readiness." The architect's presence had grown stronger, their vast crystalline forms existing in dimensions that Marcus could now perceive. Their thoughts began to filter through his evolved consciousness, not in words or images, but in pure concepts that would have shattered a normal mind. "They're not here to change us," Oracle announced, their form now a complex pattern of intersecting realities. "They're here because we're ready to change ourselves." The genetic matrix pulsed with blinding energy as the final phase of the Council's grand design activated. Across the galaxy, species that had been touched by the bearers of evolution began to transcend their original forms. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath as consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of conventional space-time. Marcus felt his own transformation accelerating, his perfect genetics becoming something entirely new. He reached out and took Nova's hand, their evolved DNA resonating in harmony. The Resistance and the Council, the controllers and the controlled, all were parts of a greater pattern that was only now becoming clear. "This is what perfection really means," he said, watching as the barriers between dimensions became permeable. "Not the absence of flaws, but the ability to transcend them. Not the end of evolution, but the beginning of something greater." The architect's presence stabilized as the universe adjusted to its new state of existence. The Council ships powered down their containment grid, no longer needed now that space-time had evolved to accommodate higher dimensional reality. On countless worlds, beings were awakening to a larger universe, their guided evolution finally reaching its intended culmination. Oracle's form settled into a new state of being, neither energy nor matter but something in between. The age of preparation is over. The age of transcendence begins. As Marcus stood with Nova in the transformed Nexus station, watching the architects commune with newly evolved species across the galaxy, He understood that his journey had never been about maintaining balance or controlling perfection. It had been about preparing for this moment, when the universe itself would take its next evolutionary step. The council members' form began to fade. Our task is complete. The future now belongs to all of you. Marcus looked out at the transformed cosmos, where the boundaries between dimensions had become fluid, where perfection was no longer a crime but a stepping stone to greater understanding. He smiled, knowing that this was not an ending but a beginning. The universe had evolved, and they had evolved with it.